You know what the absolute most expensive lie in veteran healthcare actually is? It's a phrase you've probably heard in an exam room or maybe from a well-meaning spouse.
Or even muttered to yourself, right, like in the mirror on a really rough morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It is 5 simple words. You're just getting old.
And, I mean, we know that is objectively false, mostly because of one indisputable statistic. Right now, the Department of Veterans Affairs has over 46 million rated service-connected disabilities on the books, like 46 million.
Which is just a wild number to wrap your head around.
It really is. But that data proves that military service breaks the human body in documented, entirely predictable ways. So what you are feeling in your joints, your ears and your lungs, that isn't aging, it's mileage.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Veteran Briefing. Today's mission is unpacking the reality of that mileage. We're going to dive into 5 specific medical conditions the VA already knows came from your military service.
Right. And to do this, we are pulling from a massive stack of sources. We've got the VA's own published annual disability reports, the legislative text of the PASI-T Act, clinical research data from the National Center for PTSD, and a lot of occupational medical literature.
Yeah, so we're going to look at the actual receipts the government publishes and really explore the critical reason why most veterans never even file for the compensation they've actually earned.
Because that gap, the gap between what the VA knows on a macro level through all that data and what you as an individual veteran understand about your own body, it's staggering. And it costs people their health, their peace of mind, and obviously their own benefits.
So let's unpack the overarching philosophy first, because it really frames everything else we're going to talk about today. The foundational reality of military damage is that it is cumulative and it's delayed.
Right. It's not usually just one big event.
Exactly. When we think of military injuries, pop culture trains us to picture one dramatic cinematic event, right, where someone gets medevaced out. But in reality, it's death by a million paper cuts.
Oh, for sure.
It's the repetitive concussive blasts from artillery, the daily inhalation of burn pit smoke, the sheer weight of a rucksack grinding down your cartilage over 1,000 miles of marches.
And just the years spent operating on high alert, honestly. Connecting this to the bigger picture, this is exactly why a veteran can feel physically invincible at 25, but then feel like their body is entirely failing them at 50.
Yeah, because your body is just compensating, right?
Exactly. The human body is incredibly resilient in youth. It absorbs all those micro-traumas quietly and just keeps you in the fight. It lays down tiny bits of scar tissue and compensates. But eventually, that biological credit card maxes out.
Yeah, the bill always comes due.
Right. The body decides to send you the invoice 20 or 30 years later. And the interesting thing is the VA system actually understands that delayed timeline, even if your civilian doctor simply chalks it up to middle age.
That biological invoice is actually a perfect way to look at our first condition today, which is high blood pressure or hypertension. The why behind this is, well, it's pure physiology. The human body has this autonomic alarm system designed for survival. When danger hits, the sympathetic nervous system kicks in. It floods your bloodstream with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol.
And your blood vessels squeeze tight, right? To direct blood to your major organs, your heart pounds, and your blood pressure just spikes.
Exactly. And biologically, that system evolved to keep you alive for, the 5 minutes it takes to outrun a predator?
Right, just a quick burst. But the military, however, required your alarm system to be switched on for months or even years at a time. Deployments, chronic sleep deprivation, the constant low-level threat of danger.
That constant flood of stress chemicals just never recedes.
Exactly. It's like, think of it like a thermostat that someone super glued to the combat setting.
Wow, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, over time, the body essentially forgets how to turn the heat off. Mechanically, pumping highly pressurized blood through your veins, 247, damages the inner lining of your blood vessels, which is called the endothelium.
So they basically get worn out.
Right, the vessels become stiff and rigid, they lose their elasticity. You don't just relax out of that years later.
But I imagine the challenge for a veteran is actually proving that to the VA, right? Considering how common high blood pressure is in the civilian world. My uncle has high blood pressure, and his biggest deployment was to a highly stressful accounting firm.
Right, yeah, it's super common. But the difference is that the VA has studied this specific military phenomenon so thoroughly that they actually had to concede the point. Under the recent PASI-T Act, hypertension was officially added to the presumptive list for Agent Orange exposure.
Which is a massive government-level admission.
Huge. It's the VA looking at the science and conceding that the toxic environment and the chronic stress of service directly and permanently altered cardiovascular systems.
And from a benefit strategy perspective, securing a rating for hypertension is vital because it acts as what is known as an anchor diagnosis.
Yeah, that's a crucial point.
Once the VA agrees that your high blood pressure is service-connected, it paves the way for secondary claims down the road. High blood pressure is often the domino that leads to coronary artery disease, chronic kidney disease, or even a stroke. Getting it documented now protects you when the more severe consequences show up later.
Right, you're building a foundation.
So, moving from the cardiovascular system, we have to look at something that is practically a universal military experience. Condition number 2 is hearing loss and tinnitus.
Oh yeah, the ringing in the ears. So deep inside your inner ear, you have this incredibly delicate system of microscopic sensory hair cells. I always picture them like a stadium full of tiny little seats, you know?
Yeah.
And each one is responsible for catching a specific frequency of sound.
That's a great visual.
Yeah, and the brutal biological reality is that once those hair cells are flattened or killed, whether that's by the concussive force of rifle ranges, flight lines, diesel generators, or standing next to heavy armor, they never grow back. Never. And this perfectly illustrates that delayed onset concept we talked about. The damage is immediate, but the functional loss often isn't really felt until decades later.
Right. I always think about a story that captures this perfectly. So picture 2 guys, Gary and Danny, both at 58 years old, both live on the exact same street.
Okay, Gary and Danny.
Yeah, so Gary spent 30 years selling insurance in a quiet office and playing golf on Saturdays. Danny did 22 years in the Army, started in mechanized infantry, and finished his career in the motor pool.
Right, very different environments.
Exactly. So today, Danny's knees sound like bubble wrap when he stands up, and his grandkids literally think the word "what" is his personal catchphrase. Gary, meanwhile, hears just fine.
And of course, civilian doctors will just tell Danny it's the aging process.
Exactly. But Danny isn't aging faster than Gary. He's just carrying 100,000 miles of hazardous auditory damage that Gary never had to take. When Danny was 25, he had enough redundant seats in that ear stadium to compensate for the ones the military destroyed.
His brain just filled in the gaps.
Right. But as normal aging slowly takes away a few more seats over time, the crowd his service violently thinned out at 25 becomes a totally empty stadium at 58. The reserve capacity is just gone.
And the VA handles that specific timeline in a really fascinating way. You mentioned the receipts earlier. The VA actually publishes an internal document called the Duty MOS Noise Exposure Listing.
And for our newer veterans or civilian listeners, MOS stands for Military Occupational Specialty. It's basically your specific job code in the military.
Right, your job code. So the VA went through every single MOS across all the branches and scientifically graded those jobs based on their probability of hazardous noise exposure.
Wow, every single one.
Every single one. If a veteran's specific job is rated on that list as having a high probability of noise exposure, the VA automatically concedes that the hazardous exposure occurred. You don't have to prove that the flight line was loud. They graded the hazard in writing before you even filed the paperwork.
If you're finding these discussions helpful, please subscribe to Veteran Briefing so you never miss important updates and practical information for veterans and their families.
So let's transition from the ears to the actual physical framework of the body. Condition number 3 is osteoarthritis. And to understand how the VA views joint damage, we really have to talk about the kinetic chain.
Oh, the kinetic chain is everything when it comes to orthopedic claims. The cartilage in your joints is essentially like the tread on a tire.
Right.
A normal civilian puts normal civilian miles on their tires, walking to the car, maybe mowing the lawn. The military puts your body through the physical equivalent of the Baja 1000, often with like 80 to 100 pounds of gear strapped to your back.
Yeah, it's brutal. You are jumping out of tactical vehicles, violently pounding on concrete during runs, hiking over jagged terrain. You grind 50 years of tread off those tires in just a single decade.
And arthritis is simply what happens when that cushion is just gone and the bone starts grinding directly on bone.
Exactly. And the thing is, the human body is a masterclass in overcompensation. It is not just a collection of isolated, independent parts.
Wait, let me push back here on how this actually works with VA claims, though. Let's say I fell off a truck and completely blew out my right knee in service.
Right.
It's in my medical records. But now, 20 years later, my lower back is in absolute agony, and my left hip is bone on bone. If the military only broke my right knee, how do I justify claiming the back and the hip?
Well, that is the kinetic chain in action right there. Your skeletal structure is one fully connected biomechanical machine. If you blow out your right knee in service, you don't just continue walking with a perfectly symmetrical stride, you compensate.
You develop a limp to keep weight off the pain.
Exactly.
Which you might do subconsciously for decades, right?
Decades. And decades of walking with an altered gait puts massive unnatural stress on the opposite hip and the opposite knee. They start to wear out prematurely from carrying a load they were never aligned to carry.
That makes total sense.
And it goes further. Your lumbar spine, your lower back, has to constantly twist and overcompensate just to keep your torso upright while you limp. Then your cervical spine, your neck, follows suit to keep your head level.
So a service-connected knee injury is almost never just a knee claim.
Never. It is the first domino in a chain reaction that travels all the way up your skeleton.
And, the VA's own data backs this up entirely. Looking at the receipt for joint damage, in the VA's own annual benefits report, musculoskeletal issues are the single biggest category of disability in the entire system.
By a wide margin, yeah.
We are talking about almost 18 million separately rated conditions. 18 million. The VA is not debating whether military service destroys joints. They are literally rating it and paying compensation for it millions of times over.
Right. Joint damage is the defining physical reality of the job, which actually brings us to condition number 4, the defining invisible reality of the job, which is PTSD and mental health conditions.
Yeah, the delayed bill of mental health is easily the most confusing and frustrating process for veterans to navigate. The military deliberately and meticulously rewired your brain for survival.
Absolutely.
They trained you for hypervigilance, continuous threat scanning, sleeping with one eye open, and ruthlessly shutting down your own emotions until the mission is complete. That neurological wiring kept you alive in combat zones.
It did, but the tragedy is that nobody ever gives you a transition class on how to rewire that hardware back to civilian settings.
Exactly. When you finally get out and life slows down, maybe you hit retirement age or the kids finally move out of the house, the quiet is deafening.
Yeah, without external chaos to manage, that biological alarm system we talked about earlier just starts blaring.
But there's no tangible enemy to point a weapon at. Your amygdala is acting like a faulty smoke detector, screaming that the house is on fire when you're literally just trying to buy groceries.
Yeah.
And I want to be incredibly clear here, that is not a character flaw. It is a highly trained biological system that simply never received the order to stand down.
Right. And the VA operates the National Center for PTSD, spending decades and hundreds of millions of dollars running one of the largest trauma research operations on Earth. They meticulously document exactly what chronic hypervigilance does to the human mind and body.
So I'm looking at the VA mental health rating schedule, and this is where I get really confused, and I know a lot of veterans do too.
Yeah, it's complicated.
It looks like the VA lumps all mental health symptoms, whether it's depression, anxiety, or PTSD, into one single bucket for a rating. If my PTSD is so severe that it causes crippling insomnia, which leads to sleep apnea, or the stress destroys my gut biome and causes severe stomach issues, do I just get penalized by this lumping rule?
No, so what you are referring to is the VA's rule against pyramiding. The VA generally rates all of your mental health symptoms together under one single rating because they won't pay you twice for overlapping psychological symptoms. However, the mind drives the body.
The stress doesn't stay in your head.
Exactly. The intense, chronic stress of PTSD keeps cortisol pumping through your veins, which leads to very real, physically distinct secondary conditions. We are talking about severe obstructive sleep apnea from weight gain and hormonal changes, chronic vascular migraines from constant tension, and debilitating gastrointestinal problems like irritable bowel syndrome.
Wow, so all that stems from the mental health side.
Yes. And because those issues affect completely different physical body systems, the respiratory system, the neurological system, the digestive system, they are rated as entirely separate physical secondary claims. Your mental health rating might be capped as 1%, but the physical damage it causes unlocks separate claims entirely.
So mental health doesn't exist in a vacuum. It aggressively dictates your physical health. Let's look at the fifth and final condition, respiratory disease. Think about what your lungs actually do mechanically. They act as the air filters for your entire body.
Right.
Now, inventory repeats those biological filters we're forced to process over a standard military career.
We are talking about environments just saturated with particulate matter.
Burn pit smoke filled with burning plastics and medical waste, JPA jet fuel fumes, microscopic silica sand that just bypasses your upper respiratory tract and gets deep into the pulmonary tissue.
And the daily inhalation of heavy diesel exhaust. You cannot unbreathe 20 years of that exposure.
No, you can't.
The mechanism of injury here is insidious, really. When you breathe in fine particulate matter, like the benzene from JP8 or the microscopic sand of the Middle East, it lodges deep in the alveoli of your lungs. Your body sends macrophages, which are immune cells, to try and eat the particles.
But they can't break down toxic chemicals or sand.
Exactly. The immune cells die, causing chronic inflammation. Over decades, that inflammation lays down scar tissue, a process called fibrosis.
Which totally explains the massive time delay. You might run 2 miles just fine at age 30, but by age 50, that slow accumulation of scar tissue has fundamentally restricted your airway.
Yep. It manifests as severe asthma, chronic rhinitis, chronic sinusitis, or debilitating lung diseases.
And the ultimate receipt for this is the Pan-CT Act, right?
Yes. After decades of veterans fighting to prove their lung issues were connected to airborne hazards, Congress and the VA finally put it into federal law. They made a massive list of respiratory conditions and specific cancers entirely presumptive for veterans who served in covered locations.
Meaning, if you have the diagnosis and you have the deployment on your record, the government just concedes the connection.
Exactly.
It is essentially a notarized confession from the federal government that the air you breathe destroyed your lungs, and they are responsible for the lifelong care.
So we've laid out the 5 condition categories: cardiovascular, auditory, musculoskeletal, mental health, and respiratory. We've established the physiological mechanisms behind them.
Yeah.
And we've proven that the VA already knows all of this through their published data, their research centers, and federal law. So what is the missing piece of the puzzle? If the VA already knows the damage exists, why aren't veterans automatically getting the care and compensation they earned?
Well, because the VA is a massive bureaucracy, and they are not going to comb through 46 million records to call you up and offer you compensation based on macro data. The only missing document in this entire massive equation is your specific medical evidence and your actual formal claim.
Right. It is entirely on you.
It's on the veteran to build the bridge between the VA's established rules and their personal medical reality.
You have to separate the established facts from the missing evidence in your file. And this is where veterans often need tools like a nexus letter or a solid medical evidence roadmap.
A nexus letter is basically a specialized, independent medical opinion, correct?
Yes, exactly. It is a detailed, formal letter written by a qualified medical professional. Often these are written by doctors who are actually former CNP examiners.
CNP meaning compensation and pension, right? The doctors the VA normally hires to evaluate you.
Exactly. Former CNP examiners know exactly what legal and medical language the VA requires to approve a claim. A nexus letter formally connects your current diagnosed medical condition to your military service, citing your specific military medical records and cross-referencing them with established peer-reviewed medical literature.
So it's the bridge.
It is the literal physical bridge that takes Danny's getting old, and transforms it into a scientifically backed, legally binding, successful VA claim. The VA provides the policy, the nexus letter provides the undeniable personal proof.
Because the entire system is built on documented evidence, not assumptions, even when those assumptions are glaringly obvious to everyone in the room. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, so let's summarize the 3 biggest takeaways from this deep dive.
Sounds good.
Number 1, military damage is cumulative and delayed. It is a physiological certainty that the bill will arrive decades after you take off the uniform. Number 2, the VA already acknowledges these 5 conditions in their own published data, internal policies, and federal law. It's not a well-kept secret. And number 3, you aren't just getting old. Your body has massive documented mileage, and that mileage is legally compensable.
That leads to the one practical action we want you to take today. Sit down and honestly inventory which of these 5 conditions are currently living in your body right now. Stop shrugging them off and stop toughing it out.
Yeah, please.
Get into a clinic, tell your doctor everything, and get your symptoms officially diagnosed and documented on paper. Your medical record is the foundational blueprint of everything we've talked about today. Without a diagnosis, you simply don't have a claim.
We'd love to hear from you all on this, so please share your questions, your pushbacks, or your own experiences navigating these types of claims in the comments section below. And if this deep dive brought you some clarity or value, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with fellow veterans, active duty members, and military families who might really need to hear it. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. The next time you see a 20-year-old active duty service member carrying a rook or working a flight line, ask yourself, what is the true lifelong physical cost of the blank check they just wrote to this country? And are we as a society and a system actually prepared to cash it for them in the year 2050?
Thank you for watching Veteran Briefing. Take care, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next episode.